You know you should start, you know the deadline is approaching. You can feel the anxiety building in your chest like a slow burning fire, and yet you open another tab, you scroll, you reorganize your desk, you do anything at all except the one thing that matters. And here is the part that makes no sense. You are not lazy, and you never were. What if I told you that procrastination has nothing to do with time management, nothing to do with discipline, and everything to do with fear? Your brain is treating that task on your to-do list the same way it would treat a predator in the wild. Fear disguised as delay. The moment you think about that project, your amygdala floods your system with stress hormones. Your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational planning, goes offline, and you reach for your phone like a reflex. Today, we are going to dismantle the psychology of procrastination piece by piece. From the neuroscience of avoidance to the childhood wounds that fuel it, to the one shift that can finally break the cycle. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Stay with me because by the end, you will never see procrastination the same way again. The amygdala hijack. Let us start with the organ responsible for all of this, your brain. When you think about a task that feels overwhelming, your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, activates. It does not care that you are sitting safely at your desk. It registers the emotional discomfort associated with that task and treats it as a genuine threat. Your fight or flight response kicks in before you even realize what happened. Dr. Tim Pitchell, one of the world's leading researchers on procrastination, puts it simply: procrastination is not a time management problem. It is an emotion regulation problem. Your brain is not choosing laziness. It is choosing survival. It is choosing to avoid the pain it anticipates. Think about it. When was the last time you procrastinated on something you genuinely enjoyed? Probably never. You procrastinate on the things that make you feel anxious, inadequate, or uncertain. Your brain cannot distinguish between emotional pain and physical pain. The neural circuits are nearly identical, so when that deadline triggers dread, your brain responds the same way it would if you touched a hot stove. It pulls away. But here is the cruel irony that makes everything worse. The avoidance loop. When you avoid the task, you feel temporary relief. Your brain registers that avoidance worked, the threat went away, so it reinforces the behavior. This is classical conditioning at its most destructive. Task triggers anxiety, anxiety triggers avoidance, avoidance triggers relief. And relief is the most dangerous reinforcer in psychology. Because now your brain has learned a lesson: when something feels bad, run. Every time you procrastinate, you are literally training your brain to procrastinate more. The neural pathways for avoidance get stronger. The threshold for discomfort gets lower. Tasks that were manageable last month now feel impossible. Avoidance feeds itself. And the worst part, you are fully aware of what you are doing. You watch yourself scroll through social media while the deadline approaches, and you feel disgusted with yourself. That self-disgust creates more negative emotion, which triggers more avoidance, which creates more self-disgust. If this cycle is resonating deep within you right now, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring the depths of your psyche with me. Because what comes next reveals why this pattern started long before you think, and it takes us somewhere most people never look. Childhood roots. Here is where it gets deeply personal. Procrastination is not a habit you picked up in college. For most people, its roots stretch back to childhood. If you grew up in an environment where your worth was tied to your performance, where love felt conditional on achievement, your brain learned something dangerous. It learned that failure is not just disappointing, devastating. Failure means rejection. Failure means you are not enough. So your unconscious mind developed a brilliant defense mechanism. If you never truly try, you can never truly fail. Procrastination becomes a shield. As long as you can say, "I did not really give it my best effort," your self-image stays protected. The greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. Psychologists call this self-handicapping. You create obstacles for yourself so that failure can be attributed to circumstances rather than ability. Think about the student who parties the night before an exam. If they fail, it was because they did not study, not because they are not smart enough. Procrastination protects you from the one thing you fear most. And that thing is not the task. It is what the task might reveal about you, but this fear of exposure connects to something even deeper. Perfectionism trap. If procrastination has a twin, it is perfectionism, and most people do not realize they are the same thing wearing different masks. The perfectionist does not delay because they do not care. They delay because they care too much. Every unfinished project represents a possibility. It could be brilliant, it could be perfect, but the moment you submit it, that possibility collapses into reality, and reality is never perfect. Perfect is the enemy. Research by psychologist Gordon Flett shows that perfectionistic concerns, the fear of not meeting standards, are one of the strongest predictors of chronic procrastination. Not perfectionistic strivings, not high standards themselves, but the fear of falling short of those standards. Here is what this means practically. You are not procrastinating because your standards are too high. You are procrastinating because your self-compassion is too low. You demand perfection because you cannot tolerate being human. The perfectionist procrastinator lives in a constant state of anticipatory shame. They feel the shame of an imperfect result before they have even started, and so they stay frozen in a prison of their own expectations. And this brings us to the emotion that drives it all. Shame engine. Shame, not guilt. Shame, there is a critical difference. Guilt says I did something bad. Shame says I am bad. When you procrastinate and then feel terrible about it, you are not experiencing guilt about a missed deadline. You are experiencing shame about who you believe you are. Brené Brown spent decades researching shame and found something remarkable. Shame is the most powerful and least discussed emotion in human psychology. It thrives in silence, secrecy, and judgment. And procrastination feeds all three. You procrastinate in secret. You judge yourself harshly. And you never talk about it because you believe everyone else has it together. Shame corrodes the very part of us that believes we are capable of change. This is why motivational advice fails. When someone says just do it or stop being lazy, they are speaking to the rational brain. But procrastination lives in the emotional brain. It lives in the limbic system, wrapped in layers of shame, fear, and self-doubt. Shame silences change. You cannot think your way out of an emotional problem. And this is precisely why most productivity advice completely misses the point. Productivity lies. The self-help industry has spent decades selling you the wrong solution. Buy this planner, try this app, wake up at 5 in the morning, use the Pomodoro technique. 1. More discipline will fix you. 2. Better tools will save you. 3. Harder work will heal you. None of it works, not because the techniques are bad, but because they are treating the symptom while ignoring the disease. Giving a chronic procrastinator a better calendar is like giving someone with a broken leg a faster pair of shoes. Useless. Dr. Fuskia Sidwar at the University of Sheffield found that procrastination is fundamentally linked to poor self-compassion, not poor self-discipline. The people who procrastinate most are not the ones who lack structure. They are the ones who lack kindness toward themselves. You do not need more discipline, you need more understanding. Every time you beat yourself up for procrastinating, you increase the negative emotion associated with the task, which increases avoidance, which increases procrastination. The very thing you think will motivate you, self-criticism, is the fuel that keeps the cycle burning, and that leads us to a question that changes everything. Present self-trap. Why does your brain consistently choose short-term relief over long-term reward? The answer lies in something neuroscientists call temporal discounting. Your brain treats your future self as a stranger. The person who will suffer the consequences tomorrow does not feel real to you right now. Research from UCLA used brain imaging to demonstrate this. When people think about their future selves, the brain activation patterns look almost identical to when they think about a complete stranger. You are not being irresponsible. Your brain literally cannot feel the pain it is creating for tomorrow. Future you is a stranger. This is why deadlines far in the future feel meaningless and why panic sets in only at the last minute. The closer the deadline gets, the more your future self starts to feel like your present self. Suddenly the consequences become real. Suddenly the motivation appears. But by then, the quality of your work has been compromised, the stress has taken its toll, and the shame cycle begins again. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So if our brains are wired against us, is there any hope? Absolutely. But the answer is not where you expect it. Compassion shift. The single most effective intervention for chronic procrastination is not a productivity hack. It is self-compassion. Treating yourself with kindness is not weakness, it is neuroscience. Dr. Kristen Neff's research shows that self-compassion reduces the negative emotional charge around difficult tasks. When you stop punishing yourself for procrastinating, you remove the shame that fuels the avoidance cycle. Think about how you would treat a friend who came to you and said, "I cannot stop procrastinating and I feel terrible about it." Would you say, "You are lazy and pathetic, just do the work"? Of course not. You would say, "I understand. That sounds really hard. What is making this feel so overwhelming?" That voice, the compassionate one, is what your brain needs to hear, not because it is soft, but because it is effective. Self-compassion lowers cortisol levels. It reduces amygdala activation. It literally calms the threat response that triggers procrastination in the first place. Kindness rewires the brain. This is not motivational fluff. This is measurable, repeatable neuroscience. But knowing this is only half the battle. You need a practical framework to apply it. The 5 minutes. Here is the practical framework that bridges the gap between understanding and action. It is called the 5-minute commitment. Not because 5 minutes is a magic number, but because 5 minutes is small enough that your amygdala does not perceive it as a threat. You do not need to finish, you only need to start. When you tell your brain, I only need to work on this for 5 minutes, the emotional barrier drops dramatically. The anticipated suffering shrinks from overwhelming to manageable. And here's what researchers found happens next. Once people start a task, over 80% of them continue working past the 5-minute mark. Because the emotion your brain feared, that dread, that inadequacy, rarely materializes once you are actually engaged. The anticipation of pain is almost always worse than the pain itself. Seneca knew this 2,000 years ago. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Combine this with emotional labeling, the simple act of naming what you feel. Instead of thinking, I should work on this but I do not want to, try saying, I am feeling anxious about this task because I am afraid it will not be good enough. Naming the emotion reduces the power it holds over you. Research by Dr. Matthew Lieberman at UCLA shows that putting feelings into words reduces amygdala activation by up to 50%. But there is one final piece to this puzzle that ties everything together. Rewire the pattern. Everything we have discussed leads to this single realization. Procrastination is not your enemy, it is a messenger. Every time you procrastinate, your brain is telling you something important. It is saying, this task triggers an emotion I do not know how to handle. The question is not how do I force myself to do it. The question is what emotion am I avoiding and why. When you approach procrastination with curiosity instead of judgment, everything shifts. You stop fighting yourself and start understanding yourself. This is the rewiring process. Step 1, notice the urge to avoid without acting on it. Step 2, name the emotion underneath. Step 3, respond with compassion, not criticism. Step 4, take the smallest possible action. Step 5, celebrate the start, not the finish. Notice, name, compassion, act. This is not a one-time fix, it is a practice. Some days you will fall back into the old pattern, and that is part of the process. The goal is not perfection, the goal is awareness. Every moment of awareness is a moment of freedom from the pattern. Because once you see the pattern clearly, it can never control you the same way again. So here is the truth you came here to find. You are not procrastinating because you are lazy. You are not procrastinating because you lack willpower. You are procrastinating because somewhere along the way, your brain learned that certain tasks carry emotional danger and it is trying to protect you. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The deadlines that paralyze you, the projects you avoid, the goals you abandon, they are not evidence of your weakness. They are invitations to understand yourself more deeply. Procrastination was never the problem. It was always the symptom. The problem was the fear underneath, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of discovering that you are not as capable as you pretend to be. But here is what I want you to remember. The fact that you are watching this video means you are already breaking the pattern. Awareness is the first crack in the wall, and once the wall cracks, it cannot hold. Awareness breaks chains. If you made it this far, comment amygdala override if you are ready to stop running from yourself and start understanding why you run. Welcome to the Psyche Project. If this changed how you see yourself, subscribe. Understanding your psyche is a lifelong journey. See you in the next video.